Hello and welcome to my view from the piano bench. We do this on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. here in my Joe Holt's Notes YouTube channel, in addition to Piano for My Friends on Thursday evenings. On Wednesday evenings, we move the phone camera a little closer, and I thought it was close, but it feels a little further away, and I don't want to feel like I have to shout across the room. So hopefully I can be heard well enough. On Thursday evenings, it's more about just me playing and being ridiculous. But I'm ridiculous in any case. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest. Thank you to those of you who support and encourage me through the links you'll find on the support page of my website. And you'll see a link to that in the video description. And if you've not been to my website, check it out. Check out what's going on. If you do visit the support page and you in particular watch with some regularity, I'll ask you to consider a drop in the tip jar, the virtual tip jar. The Patreon option is for people who do watch regularly. It's just an ongoing means of support for me, whatever modest level you would like to do. And ongoing support such as that will receive a monthly thank you email from me with exclusive content. That's what sponsors these videos. I have no other monetization or funding source. So thank you. I'm glad to continue to do these. So, with the video camera, or the phone, closer to the piano, you can't see everything that's going on here, but, and this will be a little bit about playing, so I'll try to do demonstrating down here. And I've titled this video for describing a topic, an extension of my arm. And I do really feel that the piano is that. And I felt that that gave me a subject, not really knowing what I am going to say, but having a sense of where I'm going to jump in, to go on for an hour or so and hopefully say something interesting or provocative or ridiculous or whatever motivates you to consider staying with me and watching. So thank you. When I first started using that term was when I became a church organist when I was 19 years old. And I became a church organist under protest. It was the church I grew up in. And of course, everybody knew I played piano. And everybody just kind of made me heir apparent on the organ. And I was having none of it. I did not care for the organ. There's so much I didn't like about it. One of the organists that we had loved playing the organ and felt that she could persuade me that the organ is a very expressive instrument for all the things that you can choose in terms of sound options and such, and 2 manuals and different volumes, and and in fact you can have 3 hands with your pedal. And I was having absolutely none of it. And without going into the story, I've told it before, I gradually allowed myself to just succumb to the idea. And then once I did, I took it seriously and did formal study and got myself in shape. And I did discover recently that my organ master shoes no longer fit on my feet. That was not a fun realization. But at this point in my life, I would have not ordered that size of shoe. I'm looking down at it. I had gotten it out of my closet for reasons other than wanting to play the organ again. That's another story that maybe I'll tell another time, but probably not. And as I kind of progressed playing the organ became its own beast, its own sort of niche for me. And when I played in the church service, and I wound up being organist / musical director for that church for 11 years, I made myself be strictly a classical organist. But I also made myself, and I made this a condition of me taking the job, that I did some of the service on piano. And I opened up on piano, and I was myself. I'm my improvisational self, appropriate stylistically. And on the organ, I was all classical all the time. And it was a good discipline for me. And I appreciated doing it. But when somebody asked me about some part of it, and it could have been this person who kept thinking I would fall in love with playing the organ, my response was, the organ is a box I contend with. The piano is an extension of my arm. And that's one of the things that would come out of my mouth, that occasionally does, that nobody really has a comeback to. It's like, okay, that's the bottom line, right? The organ is a box I contend with, and the piano is an extension of my arm. And I've had lots of winding road experiences that bring me back to realizing that the piano is an extension of my arm. And it's a place where I can be truly expressive, and where I've learned about myself that my bag, my center of gravity, is expression. It's not having the fastest technique in the world. It's not having the most knowledge of theoretical concepts. It's just about expression. And although I don't do a lot of teaching these days, there was a time where I did, a lot of the emphasis for me will focus on how you're expressing from the piano. Actually, I feel conflicted when I say that. It depends on what the nature of the lessons are. But if the path is open for me to get there and the student is receptive, then we can just really go down the road of telling a story through the music you play, conveying emotions through playing. And when I say the piano is an extension of my arm, it didn't really dawn on me to connect the dots in this particular way until just very recently. That what that means is that everything that you do in terms of playing piano that affects what the sound is and what the expression is, absolutely every piece of it flows from the fingers. Unlike the organ. Now, my organist friend took the idea that because there were all these different stops, the diapason, the flute, the trumpet, the bassoon, the blah, 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 that you could do all these different things with the organ, and therefore you could be expressive. It's like, well, not really, because whatever, is coming out of the pipe or fake pipe, right? The sound being generated at the base is exactly the same. There's nothing you can do here to affect the sound. Now, actually, that's probably a plus for most people, because you don't have to concern yourself with being so attentive to how you play the keys. And I think that was sort of on the mind of this person, maybe subconsciously, where you could just play the note and then you could make the organ, you could tell the organ how to, at some level, express the note, right? And this has been a funny day, having nothing to do with this, so can't say I'm entirely on center when I noodle here and play. Different, right? So I found myself doing this. Okay, let's talk about that. Right? So everything about the nature of the sound is all generated by how I strike the key. Now, that means that when you play piano, and here's a big part of what I'll probably be talking about, why piano technique is so important, why developing the ability to control what you do is so vital playing the piano when it is not playing a non-touch sensitive keyboard instrument, particularly like a pipe organ. Because if you want a certain sound, then you have to play the key the same way each time to get that sound. And what if you have 5 different notes and you want them all to be distinct in their sound, or at least their volume? Now, I did a okay job. I didn't do it consistently, but what you heard was my top note was the loudest, the inner notes were softer, the bottom note was the second loudest, right? Sorta, right? But you get the idea, right? And that's only going to happen through having the control of striking the key. So, and here's where I get conflicted as a piano teacher. So much of piano lessons has to do with, well, traditional piano lessons, not necessarily mine. Although it could be, depends. Everything is circumstantial and everything is relative and everything is contextual. But piano technique, the actual movements themselves and the wrist motions and the very minutiae of things occupy piano lessons in many circumstances. And when it gets really extreme to that, and I feel like the student is like mastering the minutiae of movement, but not having the fulfillment of expression, then I tend not to lean that hard. Because I'm about the expression. The expression, the technique allows the expression, but the expression comes from here. Now, as I say that, I'm thinking of a video that I watched recently talking about Taubman, T-A-U-B-M-A-N, Taubman technique, or rotation technique, which I was instructed in, which is like very methodical and scientific, and basically says, you master these technical maneuvers, approaches, right, in order to be able to express, and these technical maneuvers allow you to be expressive. Okay, well, what comes first? This is a chicken and the egg thing, a little bit. It's like, do you want to have a certain sound? You decide ahead, so you practice some way to do it that you kind of control, and that becomes like an exercise that you do? Or do you feel the expression and then somehow it comes out of you? And then if you've trained yourself in technical things, then it will come out of you better. It will come out of you more consistently. But it's not coming out of you because you're making a technical approach as a starting point. It's coming out of you because you're feeling it. Now, to some, this may sound like I'm, being a little picky, but I'm really not, and I think you probably get it. There's a starting point for all of us temperamentally, which is why I, fell in love with Long Long's playing. And I've told this story before. Some years ago, I'm riding in the car listening to classical music radio station, and I hear this beautifully expressed piano, beautifully expressed. And I hoped that the DJ or the announcer, do you call them DJs on classical stations? I guess you do. I was hoping that the announcer was going to give the name of the pianist afterward, and they did, and it was, or he did, or she did, or they did, someone did, and it was Long Long. And so that allowed me to look up Long Long and then discover that he's a subject of controversy. Some people love his playing, many people do. Some people can't stand his playing because they think he's a showboat and they think he's just over the top. Now, when I couldn't see him and all I could do was hear the music being expressed, I was hearing this. I was hearing it come from here. I wasn't hearing it being constructed, like I'm going to do these things and I'm going to make this movement and that's going to make the piano do this. And I'll tell you, in some classical pianists, even, you know, very, very famous names, you know, people who could play in the classical world, people who could play things that I couldn't touch ever. What it feels to me is they've mastered all those mechanics and it's not this expression. You know, a lot of classical music in that regard leaves me wanting. And that's a very big subject in terms of what exclusively reading music can do to your sense of expression. That's an interesting topic. I'm writing it down. What reading music does or can do to hinder expression. So what do you do when you're like the creative mind and things just keep popping in to your head and then they go away just as fast? What you do is you make sure you always have sticky notes. And then you have like an ugly scene of a misplaced, malcolored sticky note there. So, and then don't forget it's there. What did it say again? It said, oh, I have no idea, I can't read it. What reading music does to hinder expression? No, reading music does not hinder expression. Reading music is a source of expression if everything is plugged in together correctly. So I think you get where I'm going with this. But when I heard an interview or read an interview, one or the other, a documentation of an interview with Lang Lang included the words from him, don't just play the note, feel the note, and make every new piece your best friend. And if you're not talking, I don't know, wow, that sentence didn't come out right. I can't think of a better example of talking about expression in music. Don't just play the note, feel the note. And that's what immediately brought me to love what he said. But now that I'm talking, and again, I've mentioned this before, saying something and hearing the words being said can, you know, poke your brain and get you going. The idea of making every new piece your best friend is talking about a bond. It's talking about an emotional connection. Because when you have a friend, you have emotional connection, right? And you are tapped into expression. If you make the piece your friend, you're expressing your friend, with your friend, to your friend, about your friend, because of your friend, with your friend, right? So, yeah, that's the path. At least his path, and to whatever extent I can make it work, my path as well. And to get that, the extension of my arm, no matter what kind of music. That makes me think that I appreciate, of course, the kind comments and reactions to these videos. And I will assume that people know, if they like stumble across one of these videos, that most of what I post on YouTube is me playing, not me talking. You know, it's like if somebody says, I'd love to hear you play Misbehaving. Well, there's probably, well, there's certainly more than one posted by me video on YouTube of Ain't Misbehaving. And I promise I don't talk during them. Ha, that's good. so much I could say just about that little phrase, about the expression of the phrase. And everything I did to be expressive was through the fingers, and that's why technique is so, so important. So let's bring up this. Takeoffs and landings, in particular landings. So if you are ending a piece of music, oh, how many times have I said this to students, especially back when I was teaching a lot. You need to signal when the piece is coming to an end. You know, because it's not just going to go, 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 and abruptly stop. Because if you abruptly stop, you're going to fall off your chair listening to it. You're going to fall down, or the picture's going to fall off the wall or something. You know, so you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to build up to a big finish, ta-da, or you're going to bring it in for a landing. You're going to decelerate. You're going to release. Now, I don't remember any of the notes I played about a minute and a half ago now about that little polyphonic thing I did. You can go back and rewind it, and I'll have to go look at it. But I do feel what happened, where I was going on, and then I started being a little slower, and then I started being a little softer, and I brought it in for a landing. And you'll notice about me and my playing that that is my absolute preferred method of ending a tune when I'm playing solo. I can do the ta-da thing, but in terms of observations I've been making about other piano players who use the ta-da to basically say, okay, now stop what you're doing and applaud, that turns me off to the ta-da a little bit. You know, I understand that, you know, as far as making connections with people, and I'm, you know, much better about receiving applause than I used to be. I had these things my mind went like, well, you know, if you do most jobs, nobody claps for you, so what's the point of that? But that's not it. You know, applause is the energy coming back to you that you put out in this kind of realm. And that's communication. People want to do it when they want to do it. But I sort of have this liking this thing under the radar screen thing. So let's say you have a cocktail piano hour kind of gig, right? And I had that for years. And I found myself, not because Dave McKenna did it, but I realized later it was what Dave McKenna did. I never stopped for the hour I was playing. I just went from one tune to the next, to the next, to the next. And then people complain, you need to stop so we can applaud. Okay, I stop, applaud, quick, go. Actually, I typically didn't anyway. And it's like basically the expression just continues. Now I realize it's almost silly that I'm using that illustration, because if you watch my other video, the piano for my friends, I brought that into this, where I pretty much don't stop for the entire video. It's like, you need to stop so you can tell people what songs you played, and I understand that. But I put myself in an expressive place. And in that space, if I start talking, I take myself out of it and I have to put myself back in. And so I kind of go into this trance for an hour, if it's really working. You know, and some of them do work, and sometimes I stay deeply in it, and maybe not a trance, maybe a trance, but some space that broadens my access to expression. And we keep coming back to expression, and it all comes through here, an extension of my arm. Now, I was having a discussion on a gig last night with another musician about my keyboard that I had to use for that gig. And I don't like keyboards, and I often get a little bit curmudgeonly about even talking about keyboards. Like, I wish I never had to play one. Like, what? What kind of keyboard do you have? What do you like about it? What do you think about this? I have no idea. I want to play an acoustic piano. I wish I never had to play this thing. And actually, that's not a good way to make a good first impression on anybody if you're a musician, to do that. To basically diss theirs and everybody else's sensibilities. But I think what it comes down to is, again, the ability to express. Because when I hit a note and I open up the string, and I could open everything up further with using the damper pedal, that vibration is unique to that string, to the acoustic properties. You can digitally sample it and put it through a speaker, and it's not that at all. This is like therapy right there. You're not going to really get it coming through the phone speaker. I mean, whatever you're listening to this on. I've told you before that before one of the mainstay shows, I had the lid open, the piano, and I played a note, and talk about a trance that it put me in. And, you know, I don't have to feel like I have to play a lot of notes on the piano to truly express something. But what I do is just even the more richer. If I play a digital keyboard, it doesn't make me feel that way at all. You know, it more. Now I'm going to say this, and I have to really think if it's exactly true or what the ramifications of it are, but it stimulates my mind more than my heart. This stimulates me emotionally. Right? So maybe when I was a teenager or in my early 20s and would annoy people by saying, the organ is a box I contend with, the piano is an extension of my arm. Probably a piece of that, but not realizing it at the time, was feeling connected to the vibration, to the overtones, to the acoustic sound. Now, I always had a keyboard to use, and it was a Fender Rhodes until it wasn't, because in the 70s, that's pretty much what you had. Little synthesizers were starting to show up, but the only thing that could really substitute for a piano at first was a Fender Rhodes, and you had a Wurlitzer keyboard, but it was more like a clavichord compared to a harpsichord in the old days. It really wasn't meat and potatoes enough to put on a stage and do a gig with, and you could with the Rhodes. And there was an acoustic element to the Rhodes too. But as everything became, you know, digital and synth and sequence and sample and, you know, all that wonderful information, that was just not hitting me in that sweet spot. And I came very, very, very close to selling my keyboard. And I wouldn't have been the only one. The keyboard I used for years until it just fell apart, I bought used from another musician, and this kind of hit close to home when I did it, and it was sad. I was very sad. He had continual hand problems, and they got to the point where he couldn't play. Now for me, I never got to the point where I couldn't play, and the classical training has something important to do with that, the technique training. But he was quitting playing. He was selling his keyboard, and I went and bought his keyboard. And I really liked his keyboard, but I was so sad driving away. because that was, turning point for him, not in the direction he would have chosen, right? But I used that keyboard. I got myself another keyboard, and just became increasingly alienated from the sounds, but also getting used to it because I had to do it. So when I went on staff at the Church of the Nazarene in Chestertown, from 2003 to 2005, I was worship arts director. Did it for 3 years. They retired the acoustic piano. It was the same brand as this. It was Kawai, but it was a much less friendly Kawai. And they didn't replace it with another acoustic piano. They replaced it with a Roland FP5, maybe. Whatever, like the really cool Roland that even some classical pianists would deal with. Felt really good. And that's what I had to work with. And it's like, all right, I'm, stuck here now. That's all right. And a few years in, or a certain amount of time in, I started recording a weekly radio show that I bought some time on some local stations. And I recorded it at the church because the sound guy at the church was kind enough to come and run that for me. And I played every week for that radio show on the keyboard. I could hardly believe I was doing it. But it was like I was getting used to it. I was playing it a lot. But the thing that I noticed about it was that what I was playing was different than what I play on the piano. Because I'm not hearing the same sounds, so they're not inspiring me in the same way. And it's funny, I've said it for the first time here, that I think it's correct, that it is a little bit more intellectually stimulating or interesting as opposed to moving. And so I find myself playing more polyphonically, and I don't do a lot of big chord stuff anyway, but at least at the time I was less inclined to do it on the keyboard. But I found the zone to do it with. I recently played a couple of gigs with Tom Baldwin, great bass player from the DC area. And back around that time, I was actually working a lot with Tom. And I hadn't seen him for a long time, and I've worked with him again a few times recently. It's wonderful. But when I came into a band that he was working with, the first 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 gigs, I used my keyboard because it was, like high-end corporate parties and wedding receptions and that kind of thing. You bring all your gear. And then we had a little gig in a church social hall where there was a piano. Not a great piano, but a piano. And Tom, after like the 2 or 3 tunes, he says to me, "You've been working out new voicings?" Meaning how I construct chords, how I arrange things. And I'm like, huh. No. So actually, Tom, this is the way I really play. And so I don't think about the difference in how I express. But I'm so much more comfortable expressing from an acoustic piano. And in terms of all those wonderful sounds that I don't entirely go there, in terms of, more contemporary jazz, Bill Evans would kind of be an important figure in that road. And I would say if Bill Evans only played a Fender Rhodes or never played an acoustic piano, he wouldn't have been Bill Evans. Or at least not quite the same. And so far no one's challenged me on that. It's going to happen for sure. Wow. This has nothing to do with anything, but I don't know if you can probably can't see my right hand. Actually, everything has something to do with something. Everything is interconnected, so... So I was just playing now. I just moved it down an octave, which sounds like a mudfest, right? I'm mud wrestling now. I'm not playing a pretty chord. So So I did a little quartal thing. I did fourths in the right hand. And I'm extending a tenth in my right hand, which I don't do well. As you can see, I'm drawing like a straight line here. Ow. Yeah. What a nice sound. Now, everything about that sound has to do with how I strike the key. And did you hear what I did? I made the top note loudest as much as I could. That actually almost hurts, because that's a big stretch. That's a big stretch to put between these two fingers. And any tapping technique teacher watching me is probably having a cow right now. Yeah, but that, louder, softer, getting back louder again, putting the foundation under it. It's almost like a little curve. Now, when you talk about expression, you talk about melody. And one thing about playing the piano is making sure that whatever the melody is heard above everything else. Ooh, that was too much. Because I never play anything the same way twice, and so I have a very limited repertoire of little classical phrases that I can play the same way twice, because everything just sort of changes in my head. But that's one. I'm sort of analyzing what I'm hearing myself play. I think I would be criticized by some classical players, because in that realm it's all about what you're criticizing, right? That I actually made the inner notes too soft, and I have a tendency to do that. But the outer notes were louder, right? The inner notes were softer. Now, if I were playing a non-touch sensitive, non-weighted action keyboard, or back in the day if I were playing an organ or a harpsichord, you couldn't do that. That's why the piano was invented. To be able to bring out notes, to be able to play, get louder. So my friend who wanted to convince me that the organ was more expressive than the piano, would have to play an organ. You couldn't do that on. What did I just do? I got louder when I went up, and I got softer when I came down. The first time I got better at being softer. Now this prompts me to realize that if I were coming at this from the precision technique, I would probably be a little bit more consistent, like of being able to. And this reminds me of an anecdotal story a recording engineer told me. And I hope I represent this correctly. It was a classical vocalist. And the engineer and I were having this conversation about expression versus technical precision. And we were both on the same side that it's the expression, not the technical precision. But for some, if not many, if not most, I was going to say if not nearly all, but I won't say that. I'll just stop at most. Classical musicians, it is about technical precision primarily, even if it's about technical precision, because ultimately it's about expression. And I hope that makes sense. It kind of dovetails with what I've already said. And the precision is the most important thing. To the point where, and this is where I'm getting, there's this sort of like sound wave digital screen thing mapping that, you know, you play the sound and it shows all these wave patterns and stuff. And what this particular vocalist, classical singer, I guess opera singer, was so proud of, or it was important, that wave pattern was a certain way. And he looked at them all, and it's like, that is not correct. That one needs to be fixed. We need to fix that. And okay, he was precise. Was he being expressive? So there's a video trailer for the Masterclass series that's online. Masterclasses by all these famous people of all kinds of subjects, right? And I keep meaning to load it up onto my Facebook page just to share it, because it's really good. It just says something important. I keep forgetting. So maybe by the time you see this and you're on my Facebook musician page, you'll come across it. And it's a little 2.5-minute trailer for a master class given by Yo-Yo Ma, who's the cellist. And he basically says, he was this prodigy, right? Amazing player, and he was looking to play the perfect concert. Human perfection. Playing it perfectly was the goal. And I love what he says. If you haven't seen it, he says, no, he didn't have the... He avoided saying, I was playing a perfect concert. But he phrased it in the way that tied it right in. He said, I was giving this concert and everything was going perfectly well. That's what he said. And then he said, and I was bored out of my mind. And then he said, at that point he made a decision that he wasn't going to devote himself to human perfection anymore. He was going to devote himself to human expression. And boy, does that not change everything, right? And I have not watched the masterclass, but just in that trailer and what he says thereafter and how he talks about transmitting something that now lives in somebody else because you expressed it, right? There's so much more to the idea of expression than the idea of facility or perfection or flashiness or any of that. And I think ego plays a huge part in this. And, you know, something I've been thinking a lot about just in recent days, it's just applicable in just about everything that comes to my mind, is the idea of detachment. You know, we're getting into, you know, Eastern, Western spiritual amalgam concepts here, but this is, you know, this is applicable no matter where you're coming from. That rather than being bound to something, you let it go. And in letting it go, you have access to so much more because you're not holding on. Now you're not clutching. You're receiving, right? And you're receiving and you're giving back, right? And you're expressing, right? Now, when I say that to you, I feel that in my hands, right? I feel that in my arms. I'm holding it. I'm giving it back. And now I'm transmitting it. Of course, all of that was above where you could see. But through my fingers, through my arms, through it being an extension of my arm, right? And it's really not just an extension of my arm. It's an extension of me, right? And I never thought to say it that way, because you don't have to, because it's logically assumed. If something is an extension of my arm is connected to me. But it's not like it's a contraption that, extends my arm. It's just something that comes from here. Okay? And then you become one with it. And that opens up like a lot of stuff. But we could rephrase what Yo-Yo Ma was saying, that when you do transmit this, you are touching, you are connecting. One of the phrases that I use, you've heard me use it, when like a concert is really getting there, right? And it's connecting with people, and I'm connected, and the room is connected, and I'll say, we just throw a lasso around the room, and we gather us all up into one place. And that's what it's about, right? So I'm calling this still, I'm not going to change the name of this, because the phrase I've always used is extension of my arm. Unless I really start thinking about this now. An extension of me. That's really what it is, an extension of me. So it's an extension of my arm to allow me to extend myself. Yeah. Anyway, what did that have to do with anything? Nothing! That's interesting. Yeah, man. Okay. When I kind of like stumbled in through the side window of a building, a metaphysical building that was in my path that I didn't see coming, and the building was called Music Therapy, and all of a sudden I tripped and fell into a window, and before I knew it, I was a board-certified music therapist. A lot of you know more of the story, and I'll talk about that again at some point, which was an extension of me first realizing that I'm playing piano to connect with people. It's about other people, it's not about me, right? And one thing led to another, led to another. In my 30s, I was certified as a music therapist. And most, probably, music therapists tote their guitars around. And that's how they accompany themselves. I would bring my keyboard and bring my keyboard in the room, and that particular keyboard, I think 4 octaves, 3.5, something like that, full-size keys, but not touch sensitive, but it had some decent sounds. But what I just did before I started yakking, being able to express it here, it's just nothing like that on the keyboard. But of course, I was really glad to have it, to take it into rooms, the hospice situations and such, and I could still communicate on it. But this, man, I could just be so much more expressive. So when I travel, you know what? If I had a nickel, if you did, or a dime, or a quarter, or a dollar, for every time I've said, and you've heard this before, but, and I need to stop doing that. Because I've done a lot of these videos, and I am sort of overlapping things that I've talked about. And there are a few of you, you know, or more than a few, or some of you, who've kind of been with me from the beginning through the different manifestations of this. So you've heard me talk about these things. Nobody's complained. Nobody's said, shut up yet. So good. Maybe I should have shut up, because now I forget where I was going with that. But that was inevitable, wasn't it? But now I remember. See, that was my path of remembering. Yeah. Go figure out my brain. Nah, you don't want to touch it. Stay away. So when I travel, I have to make up somehow for the lack of opportunity to have this experience. And it really does, if I don't do it first thing in the morning, profoundly affect my day. In fact, I've been dealing with a day today that I didn't have that experience. And I will jump through whatever hoops I have to at least have a few minutes at the piano, or whatever I use the surrogate for it. Where I was going with this is when I'm on the road or something, I have to rely on a little keyboard. And there's different little grades of little keyboard that make it just like even more distant from this. And there's nothing like this. But this morning was one of the occasions where I didn't have it at all, because I really believe I set my phone alarm correctly. I guess I didn't. And the reason how I check myself is that when I hit the button to do it, you'll get a little message at the bottom, okay, alarm set for whatever, 4 hours and 18 minutes from now. And then if it reads, you know, 12 hours more, and it says like 16 hours and 18 minutes from now, then I know I forgot to set the PM and AM correctly. And I go and do that. So I'm like focused on that. So I set the alarm, and because I get up several times in the night, but the last time I went back to sleep, and I woke up, what was it, 7 minutes before I was supposed to leave the house. It's like, what? And I looked at my phone, and it was turned off. It was set, but the alarm wasn't turned on. And I think my phone did it. I think I have a gremlin on my phone. But anyway, and so I just made the decision. Okay, this is going to be a goofed up day, and I can't touch the piano. I don't have that. I can't take 2 of those 8 minutes, because it was going to take more than that anyway, right? So I just put myself in the position that a lot of people do. They get up and they just start going. That doesn't work for me. But I did it. And oh my goodness, I went right to a rehearsal. And my verbal expression was just so, you know, I wasn't able to extend myself through this instrument beforehand. So many words that didn't need to be said came out of my mouth. Because what happens when I sit down first thing in the morning? Now that was a bit of an amalgam between making it happen and letting it happen. But in the morning, I'm just letting it happen, and I can totally feel, you know, the effects of that, because it becomes a whole body, it becomes a whole person thing, and I know that about my playing. that it's a whole body, a whole person, a whole being thing. And I guess that's why doing that in the morning is so important, because I'm not pieced together correctly. My puzzle is malformed, you know, and actually sitting here just noodling at the piano, which I was going to do this without really playing the piano. I did play the piano in the rehearsal I was at, but it wasn't, because I was playing with somebody else, and it didn't accomplish a lot. It accomplished some. Sitting here doing this accomplished more than that. But I was about to start this video, and I saw that my phone didn't have enough charge on it. So I put the phone, and I have to wait, 15, 20 minutes, put a little charge in my phone. And I sat and I practiced. I worked on things with piano for my friends. I looked over some tunes. That's not what I did. But the point is that was able to open me up a little bit. But this is about expression. This is about extending myself. This is about touching you. And yeah, there's so many places I could go now. And I'm going to make a note on the other note. I'm going to put the word detachment. I'm going to think about how to talk about detachment. If you watched this last week, where I was answering a friend about, what do I listen to when I accompany people and all of that, how my ear's working. And I said, if I need to read a chord chart, I read it with a sense of detachment. And that was something just on my mind today. That if I only think about where I am, I can't go anywhere. Okay. Let's write that down. If I only think about where I am, I can't go anywhere. So what really needs to happen is you need to watch this video, and I need to have these sticky notes all over the piano. I think I'm going to start doing that. Do you think I care about appearances? Yeah, right. Because what am I really doing? I'm extending myself beyond myself, right? To reach you. So it's not about where I am. It's never about where I am. It's about where it's all going. It's about where I'm going. All right, so one more little anecdotal thing. And I'm trying to stop myself from saying, and some of you have heard me say this before, but of course I just said it. But long time ago when I taught lots of young children, and the technique I would use for expression to teach them to look at the music as a story to tell is they would have the little early grade classical piece, and I'd say, I want you to write a story in the music, above the music, that you feel the music can tell as you're playing it, right? And most kids got it, where when the music was becoming a little more then there was something more dramatic happening. When the music was relaxing, it's like, and then I went to bed and took a nap or whatever, right? And that was their means of connecting with the expression. Then what? In fact, I just illustrated how much I'm at the expression first, and that creates the technique, because you find a way to do it. And that's exactly what I did. So I was being like the opposite of the Taubman emphasis of you get your expression through. Now, I could be really criticized for how I said that because I realized that that's a little bit too narrow, but I think everybody hopefully gets the point. Okay. And what I was looking for then was the student to feel a certain thing that they would bring out in the music. And that's the point at which I would say, okay, that's great. That's great. Let me help you do that even better. Now, so you want to have this, then you're going to approach this like this. And see, when you raise your wrist like this, that makes it happen. And then you go there. But it comes from here first, right? And the piano is an extension of my arm. The piano is an extension of me. Me? Me, question mark? My soul? That which connects us to things we share universally? Through the sense of personal detachment we attain. All right, I will watch this video in a few minutes, maybe, or at some point, and write down what I just said. I think that was probably it. So let's leave it right there. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being a part of this ongoing journey. For those of you who just follow, and when I say support, I'm not just talking about like the online tip thing. I do have to solicit that every week because it's just a small group of you who do it, and it encourages me to keep going, and I'm going to keep going. And if I could, encourage, you or a few more people to come in the fold in that regard, that would be helpful. But you all are encouraging to me in so many ways, and that's just a necessary part of it. But your presence in the gigs or your email it's a wonderful connection. I appreciate it so much. So see you tomorrow night for Piano for My Friends, perhaps, hopefully, or again next week, or in person or something. Stay in touch, and I'll keep showing up, hopefully. Thank you.